The Black Maid took blame for a broken heirloom until the Mafia boss revealed who truly destroyed his legacy. Mary Jenkins, the Black Maid of the Romano family, had been working in their mansion for 5 years. She had seen it all: riches, power, and the cold indifference of the people she served. But what Mary hadn't expected, and what she was about to endure, was the public humiliation that would change everything. It all started with the heirloom, a priceless family artifact that had been passed down through generations. A delicate, antique vase, one of the few remaining tokens of the Romano family's legacy. Mary had been dusting the mantelpiece in the grand living room when it happened. Her hand brushed against the vase, sending it tumbling to the ground. The sound of shattering porcelain echoed through the room. She stood frozen, her heart racing, as the broken pieces lay scattered across the floor. Within moments, the room filled with the voices of the Romano family. "How could you be so careless?" his voice boomed. Don Vincent Romano, the Mafia boss himself, stepped into the room, his cold eyes narrowing as he surveyed the damage. "You've ruined everything," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. "This vase is worth more than your entire life." Mary felt her knees go weak. She had never seen him this angry. His eyes, usually calculating and distant, were now filled with fiery rage. But Mary, ever the quiet servant, lowered her head, ready to take the blame. "I'm sorry, sir. I'll clean it up," she whispered, her voice barely audible. She had no other choice. What else could she do? She had worked for this family for years, and yet she was still nothing more than a servant. A maid. Her status, her race, everything about her placed her at the mercy of people like Don Vincent. And so, she took the blame. She stood there as he berated her, each word a sharp sting, each insult a reminder of her place. But little did Mary know, things were about to change. Don Vincent's eyes shifted from the broken vase to the maid in front of him. He was about to speak again when a voice interrupted. "Wait," the voice said, firm and commanding. It was an unexpected voice, one that made Mary's heart skip a beat. She looked up, and there, standing at the door, was Don Vincent's son, Giovanni. Giovanni Romano, the heir to the Romano family, was known for his cool demeanor and sharp intellect. But today, he didn't look like the calculating businessman the world knew. Today, he looked like a man who had just uncovered something no one else had noticed. "You don't know who broke the vase, do you, father?" Giovanni's words cut through the tension in the room like a knife. Don Vincent froze, his anger momentarily interrupted. "What are you talking about?" he asked, his tone skeptical. Giovanni stepped into the room, his eyes locking onto the broken vase. He slowly walked toward it, his gaze never leaving the shards on the floor. "It wasn't Mary," Giovanni said calmly. "It was you, father. You were the one who knocked it over." Mary's eyes widened in disbelief as she watched Giovanni's revelation unfold. Don Vincent's expression shifted from one of fury to one of confusion, and then to one of realization. Giovanni continued, "You were the one who was so eager to show off the vase's value. In your haste, you knocked it off the mantelpiece. I saw it happen." The room fell silent. Don Vincent stood frozen, his mouth slightly agape, as if he couldn't quite believe what he was hearing. The realization hit him hard. His anger melted into something else: embarrassment, shame, or perhaps something deeper. He turned to look at Mary, his expression now softening. I didn't realize," he muttered, as if unsure of how to continue. The tension in the room dissolved, and for the first time in years, Mary felt something she had never felt before: respect. Giovanni's actions had saved her from further humiliation, and as she stood there, staring at the man who had once treated her like nothing more than a servant, she realized that perhaps, just perhaps, the world was about to change for her. The silence in the room was deafening. Mary stood motionless, her hands trembling at her sides. Don Vincent, once a towering figure of authority in her life, now seemed diminished, standing there, lost for words. The realization that he had made an egregious mistake hung in the air, thick with tension. His usual cold, calculating demeanor was nowhere to be found. For a moment, he looked almost human. Giovanni's revelation had shattered the harsh facade that Don Vincent had maintained for years. He had built his empire on power, intimidation, and control, but in that moment, it was clear that his world was crumbling. The man who had once been ruthless in his pursuit of dominance was now confronted with the one thing he had never allowed himself to face: the truth. Giovanni, however, remained calm, his expression almost too composed for the gravity of the situation. He had always been the one to keep his emotions in check, to play the part of the cool-headed businessman, but now, standing in front of his father, he couldn't help but feel a surge of satisfaction. For years, he had watched his father dismiss the people around him, treating them like tools to be discarded when no longer useful. But Giovanni had known all along that Mary wasn't the one to blame. She never had been. It was his father's carelessness, his rush to showcase the family heirlooms that had caused the vase to fall. Yet, for years, Mary had taken the blame for every mistake in this household. Giovanni wasn't about to let her carry that burden any longer. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him, but he held his ground. As Don Vincent turned to look at Mary, Giovanni could see the flicker of something new in his father's eyes. It wasn't anger, nor was it the usual dismissiveness. There was something else. Guilt? Regret? Giovanni wasn't sure, but he knew one thing. The old man was finally seeing Mary as more than just a servant. Don Vincent's eyes softened for a moment, a rare vulnerability showing through. He looked at Mary, who had remained silent throughout the entire exchange, her face a mixture of shock and disbelief. She had never imagined that anyone, let alone Giovanni, would ever stand up for her. She had always believed that in the world of the Romeros, people like her, people from her background, were meant to be seen and not heard. They were meant to clean, to serve, and to fade into the background. But today, something was changing. Mary, Don Vincent finally spoke, his voice lower than usual, almost apologetic. He trailed off, unsure of how to continue. The words didn't come easily. He had never been one to admit fault, let alone express remorse. But something about the way Giovanni had stood up for Mary, something about seeing her in the light of the truth, made him rethink everything. "I'm sorry," he muttered, his words barely audible. Mary's heart skipped a beat. She had heard countless apologies from people over the years, but none of them had ever felt genuine. None of them had ever made her believe that things could be different. But there was something in Don Vincent's tone, something raw and uncharacteristic, that made her wonder if maybe, just maybe, this was the apology she had been waiting for. Giovanni stepped forward, his gaze never leaving his father's face. He knew this moment was crucial. His father's apology was a small, but significant step toward changing the dynamic between them. He had always been the one to clean up his father's messes, to smooth over the cracks in the family's image. But now, for the first time, he was the one calling the shots. He was the one making sure that Mary wouldn't be treated as invisible anymore. "You don't have to apologize to her," Giovanni said, his voice firm but not unkind. "You should apologize to yourself, and to everyone else who's ever been treated this way." His words hung in the air, and Don Vincent couldn't deny the truth in them. For years, he had lived in his own bubble of power, thinking he could control everything and everyone around him. But today, that illusion was shattered, and for the first time in a long time, he realized that maybe he wasn't always right. Maybe it was time to start listening. Mary's hands remained at her sides, her mind racing. She wanted to speak, wanted to thank Giovanni for standing up for her, but the words wouldn't come. She had spent so long keeping her emotions in check, guarding herself from the harshness of this world, that now, in this unexpected moment of kindness, she didn't know how to react. But before she could say anything, Giovanni turned to her, his expression softening. "You don't have to apologize for something that wasn't your fault," he said gently. "You've been carrying that burden for far too long." Mary looked up at him, her eyes meeting his for the first time without fear. She could see the sincerity in his gaze, the quiet strength that he had always hidden beneath his stoic exterior. And for the first time in a long while, she felt like someone truly saw her. As the tension in the room began to dissipate, Don Vincent looked at Mary once more. "From now on," he said slowly, his voice barely above a whisper, "I won't make the same mistake again. I'll make sure you're treated with the respect you deserve." The words felt heavy, like they were meant to signify a turning point in their relationship, but Mary wasn't sure if she could trust them yet. It had been too long, and the scars of years of mistreatment weren't so easily healed. But for the first time in her life, she allowed herself to hope. The days following that moment in the Romano mansion felt like a blur to Mary. She had always been invisible, just a figure in the background, a servant who was only seen when something went wrong. But now, everything had changed. Giovanni's words echoed in her mind, and for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe she didn't have to be just a maid, a shadow in someone else's life. She could be more than that. She could be seen. It had been a week since Giovanni's revelation, and things had been different around the house. The atmosphere, once thick with tension, now felt lighter, as though the walls themselves had exhaled a long-held breath. Don Vincent's presence, though still powerful and commanding, seemed more tempered. He spoke to Mary with a kindness that she had never expected, and although she still felt a lingering doubt, a part of her wondered if this new, softer version of him was here to stay. Giovanni, too, had changed. He no longer seemed like the cold, calculating heir to the Romano Empire. There was a warmth to him now, a subtle but undeniable shift. He would often stop by the kitchen where Mary worked, exchanging small pleasantries, asking how she was doing. He even smiled at her sometimes, something that felt both strange and comforting. It was during one of these encounters, as Mary was preparing the dinner table, that Giovanni stopped by once more. He leaned against the doorframe, his gaze thoughtful. "How are you holding up, Mary?" he asked, his voice soft, almost gentle. Mary hesitated for a moment, surprised by the question. She had never been asked that before, at least not by anyone who wasn't trying to get something from her. She set down the silverware she had been arranging and looked up at him. "I'm managing," she said, her voice steady but still tinged with the uncertainty she had carried for years. Giovanni smiled, though it was brief. "You've been through a lot," he said quietly, "and I know it's not enough, but I want you to know that I see you." Mary felt her heart skip a beat. Those words, simple yet profound, struck a chord within her. She had always longed to be seen, to be more than just a background figure in other people's lives. And now, standing in front of Giovanni, she realized that maybe, just maybe, she was beginning to find her place in this world. That evening, as the sun began to set and the mansion was bathed in the warm, golden light of dusk, Don Vincent called Mary into his study. Her heart raced as she stood before the door, her palms sweating. She had never been summoned to his office before, not for anything other than punishment or reprimand. But now, things were different. She had already proven herself in a way that none of them had expected. She had stood tall in the face of his fury and had earned the respect of the man who once saw her as nothing more than a servant. "Come in, Mary," Don Vincent's voice called from within. She pushed the door open and entered, her steps cautious but steady. Don Vincent sat behind his desk, his face illuminated by the soft glow of the desk lamp. For a moment, he didn't speak. He simply studied her with a look that Mary couldn't quite decipher. "Sit," he said finally, gesturing to the chair across from him. She took a seat, her eyes lowering to the polished wood of the desk. The air between them was thick with anticipation, and Mary wondered what he wanted from her now. Had she done something wrong? But no, this felt different. There was no anger in his voice, no edge to his words. It was as though he was waiting. "Mary," he began, his tone uncharacteristically soft. "I've been thinking a lot about the other day, about what Giovanni said." Mary's heart skipped again. She hadn't expected him to bring it up, but here it was. The moment she had feared might come, the moment when he would retract his apology. Or, worse, diminish it. But Don Vincent's gaze softened as he continued. "I've made a lot of mistakes in my life," he said quietly, "and I've hurt a lot of people. You've been one of them, and I'm sorry for that." The sincerity in his voice was undeniable. Mary felt a lump form in her throat. She had spent so many years living under his shadow, always hoping for an apology that never came, always wondering if anyone would ever see her as more than just a maid. And now here it was, a genuine apology, from a man who had never offered one before. I don't know what to say," Mary whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Don Vincent nodded slowly, as if he understood the weight of her silence. "You don't have to say anything," he replied. "I just wanted you to know that things are going to be different from now on." Mary swallowed hard, the reality of his words sinking in. She wasn't sure what this change meant for her, or for her future in the Romano household. But one thing was certain. She would never again be the invisible woman she had once been. And for the first time in her life, Mary felt a flicker of hope. She had been seen, heard, and respected. And maybe, just maybe, that was all she needed to start rebuilding her life. The days that followed in the Romano mansion were a whirlwind for Mary. It had only been a week since Don Vincent's unexpected apology, but already the shift in her life felt monumental. Giovanni continued to check in on her, never making her feel like just another maid. Every morning, he would greet her with a warm, "Good morning, Mary," and sometimes, if he had the time, they would have brief conversations over breakfast. She had never imagined that the life of a maid could feel so different, so human. As she moved through the mansion, she noticed that the staff, the other maids, and even the gardeners seemed to be treating her with more respect. There were no more whispers behind her back, no more looks of judgment when she entered the room. It was as if Giovanni's actions had rippled through the household, transforming the way everyone saw her. Don Vincent, too, seemed to have softened in his approach toward her. The once cold, imperious man now greeted her with a respectful nod whenever their paths crossed. He even asked her opinions on matters of the household, something he had never done before. It felt strange, but at the same time, it was a relief. For the first time, Mary felt as though she wasn't just invisible to the people around her. She was seen. But despite all these changes, Mary couldn't help but wonder how long this newfound respect would last. Would Giovanni's intervention be enough to change the dynamics for good? Or was this just a temporary shift, a moment of kindness that would eventually fade? She had spent so many years hiding in the background, never expecting anything more than to be overlooked, that she couldn't shake the feeling that this might all be too good to be true. One afternoon, as Mary was cleaning the grand dining room, Giovanni entered the space, his expression thoughtful. "Mary," he said, his voice calm, "I've been thinking about something. I know it's not easy to trust people after everything you've been through, but I need you to know that you don't have to hide anymore. You don't have to be afraid." His words hit her like a wave. She had never really let anyone in before. She had spent years building walls around herself, protecting her heart from the pain of being overlooked and dismissed. But Giovanni's words made her feel something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. She looked up at him, her eyes searching his for any sign of insincerity, but there was none. He was being genuine. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe this was real. "I've been here for so long, Giovanni," Mary said quietly, her voice trembling slightly. "So long that I've forgotten what it feels like to be treated like a person, not just a maid. I don't know how to trust this. I don't know how to believe that things can be different." Giovanni stepped closer, his eyes softening. "I understand," he said. "I know it's hard, especially when you've been treated the way you have. But I promise you, we're going to make sure you're treated with respect from now on. You've earned it." Mary felt a lump in her throat. She hadn't realized how badly she had longed to hear those words until now. The promise of respect, the promise of being seen, was something she had never dared to hope for. But here it was, standing in front of her. Giovanni reached out, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. "You're not invisible anymore, Mary," he said, his voice low but firm. "You're important." She swallowed hard, her heart pounding in her chest. "Thank you," she whispered, the words coming out more emotional than she had intended. Giovanni gave her a small, reassuring smile before stepping back. "Take care of yourself, Mary. I'll see you later." As he left the room, Mary stood there for a moment, her mind racing. Could it really be this simple? Could this respect, this kindness, be something that lasted? She wasn't sure, but for the first time, she felt like she had a chance. Later that evening, as she finished her work in the kitchen, Don Vincent approached her again. This time, there was no apology, no grand gesture. Just a simple, quiet conversation. "Mary," he began, his tone steady, "I know I've asked a lot of you over the years, and I know I haven't always treated you as I should have." Mary nodded, not sure how to respond. Don Vincent continued, "But I want you to understand that I value your work. I've seen the way you've carried yourself, even in difficult times. And that's something that deserves respect." His words were simple, but they carried weight. It wasn't much, but it was enough for Mary to believe that maybe, just maybe, things were changing for the better. That night, as Mary lay in her small room, she reflected on everything that had happened in the past week. It had been a whirlwind of emotions, of unexpected kindness, and of a world she had never imagined could open up to her. She wasn't sure what the future held, but she knew one thing for certain. She no longer had to live in the shadows. For the first time, she felt seen, heard, and respected. And that was all she had ever wanted. The days stretched into weeks, and with each passing day, Mary began to feel like a different person. The mansion that had once felt cold and oppressive now felt more like a place where she belonged. Giovanni continued to check in on her, always with that same warm smile and a sense of sincerity that Mary had never experienced before. It was as if he genuinely cared about her well-being, not just as a maid, but as a person. And for the first time in years, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she was more than just the help. Mary had been raised to believe that people like her didn't get to dream, that those who worked in kitchens and cleaned expensive homes were meant to remain invisible. But Giovanni had shattered that belief. He had shown her a world where respect wasn't a privilege reserved for the powerful, but a right that everyone, regardless of their status, deserved. It was a hard lesson to learn, one that she had spent years suppressing. But now, standing in the Romano mansion, Mary felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Hope for a future that was different from the past she had known. One evening, as Mary was preparing dinner for the family, Don Vincent entered the kitchen. Mary didn't look up immediately. She had grown used to his presence, though the weight of his gaze always made her feel slightly uneasy. But this time, as he approached, she could sense that something was different. He wasn't angry. He wasn't distant. There was a quietness about him, an almost contemplative air that Mary hadn't seen before. "Mary," Don Vincent said, his voice softer than usual. She looked up, startled by the change in his tone. "Yes, sir," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady, though her heart raced in her chest. "I wanted to thank you," he continued, his eyes meeting hers for the first time without the usual coldness. "For everything you've done for this family. I know I haven't always been kind to you." Mary swallowed hard, unsure how to respond. She had heard many people apologize over the years, but never had she expected one from Don Vincent. I don't need any thanks, sir," she said quietly. "I've always done my best." Don Vincent nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "You've done more than your best, Mary. You've shown us something we've been blind to for far too long." Mary felt a warmth spread through her chest. It was the first time anyone had acknowledged her efforts so openly, especially not Don Vincent. He was the head of the family, the one who had built his empire on strength and fear. But now, he was speaking to her like an equal. It was both humbling and overwhelming. "I know things haven't been easy for you," he continued, his voice growing more sincere. "But I want you to know that you are part of this family. You always have been. And I promise, from now on, things will be different. You will be treated with the respect you deserve." The words hit Mary like a wave. She had never imagined this moment would come, certainly not from the man who had once made her feel so small. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Don Vincent gave her a small nod, as though he understood the weight of her emotions. Then, with a final glance, he turned and left the kitchen, leaving Mary standing there, her heart full of emotions she couldn't quite process. The next few days passed by in a blur. Mary tried to focus on her work, but her thoughts kept drifting back to that moment with Don Vincent. For the first time in years, she felt like she was truly seen. Giovanni's kindness had opened the door to a new reality, and now, Don Vincent's words had sealed it. Mary had been a part of this family for so long, but it was only now that she truly understood what that meant. She wasn't just an employee. She wasn't just the help. She was a person, with her own dignity, her own worth. It was a concept that had been foreign to her for most of her life, but now, it felt like a truth she couldn't ignore. One afternoon, Giovanni found Mary in the garden, tending to the flowers. He had grown used to seeing her work in the kitchen, but today, there was something different about her. She was standing taller, her movements more confident, as if the weight of the years of invisibility had been lifted. "Mary," Giovanni called, his voice warm. She turned, surprised, and smiled. "Giovanni," she said softly, "I didn't expect to see you out here." "I could say the same for you," he replied with a chuckle. "But it's good to see you taking some time for yourself." Mary felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words. "I'm just trying to keep busy," she said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Giovanni stepped closer, his gaze softening. "I can see that. But remember, it's okay to take a break. You've earned it." For a moment, neither of them spoke. They simply stood there, the soft rustling of the leaves the only sound between them. "Thank you," Mary finally said, her voice quiet but filled with sincerity. "For everything. For seeing me. For making me believe that maybe I deserve more than just being invisible." Giovanni smiled, his expression warm. "You've always deserved it, Mary. I just gave you a little push to see it for yourself." Mary nodded, feeling a tear slip down her cheek. It wasn't out of sadness, but out of the overwhelming sense of gratitude she felt. For the first time in her life, she had a future that wasn't defined by her past. She had hope. The days were growing warmer as spring settled over the mansion, and Mary found herself increasingly comfortable in her new reality. The fear, the uncertainty that had once clouded her every action, had begun to fade. Each day felt like a small victory, a victory that she hadn't dared to imagine before. Giovanni continued to show kindness, and even Don Vincent's change in demeanor became more consistent. Mary had started to believe that the respect she was receiving wasn't just a passing phase. She was beginning to see herself differently too. The old, familiar walls that had once protected her heart were slowly being dismantled, brick by brick. But, despite all the positive changes around her, Mary still felt a lingering uncertainty deep within her. She couldn't help but wonder, was she really a part of this new family dynamic? Was she truly accepted, or was this just a fleeting moment of kindness that would eventually fade away, just like the others? One afternoon, as Mary worked in the garden, tending to the flowers she had come to care for, Giovanni appeared, as he often did, to check on her. He was always so calm, always so composed. But today, there was something different in his eyes, a flicker of something that she couldn't quite place. "Mary," he said, his voice warm and steady. "Can we talk for a moment?" She turned to face him, brushing the dirt off her hands. "Of course, Giovanni. What's on your mind?" Giovanni hesitated for a moment, as if weighing his words carefully. "I've been thinking," he began, "about everything that's changed. About you. About the way things have been going in the house." Mary frowned slightly, unsure where he was going with this. "It's been different," she replied cautiously. "In a good way," she added quickly, almost as if she needed to reassure herself. Giovanni nodded. "I know," he said quietly, "and I'm glad. But there's something I need to ask you." Mary's heart skipped a beat. Was he going to say that things were changing again, that the kindness, the respect, was all just a temporary act? She braced herself for whatever was coming next. "You've been here for a long time," Giovanni continued, his tone softer now. "And I know how much you've done for this family. But I want you to think about something, Mary. Have you ever thought about what you want?" Mary blinked, taken aback by the question. "What I want," she echoed. Giovanni smiled, though it was faint. "Yes, what you want for yourself. For your future. Do you want to keep working here, staying in the shadows? Or do you want more than that?" The question hung in the air, heavy with significance. Mary had spent so long focused on survival, on getting through each day without drawing attention, that she had never stopped to ask herself what she truly wanted. She had always assumed that this was it, that her life, her place, was simply to serve others. But now, Giovanni was asking her to consider something more. Something for herself. She felt a tightness in her chest as she thought about it. Could she dare to dream? Could she dare to think of a life outside of the mansion, outside of the role she had been given? I don't know," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "I've never really thought about it. I've always just tried to do my job, to make sure everything is in order." Giovanni stepped closer, his gaze kind. "That's what I thought," he said softly. "But I want you to know that you deserve more than that, Mary. You deserve to be happy. You deserve to have a life where you're not just hidden in the background." Mary's heart raced. Could she truly believe that? Could she really step into the light and claim her own future? Giovanni placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch warm and reassuring. "I know it's a lot to ask, but I want you to think about it. You don't have to decide right now, but I want you to consider what you want out of life, not just what you've been given." Mary nodded slowly, her mind racing with the possibilities. For the first time in her life, she felt as though she had a choice. She wasn't just a maid anymore. She was a person, and maybe, just maybe, she could have a future that was hers to shape. As Giovanni left her to her thoughts, Mary stood there in the garden, surrounded by the beauty of the flowers she had cared for, and for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to imagine a different life. A life where she wasn't defined by her role, her race, or her past. A life where she could choose her own path, free from the limitations she had once accepted. The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating, and she knew that it would take time to fully embrace it. But for now, she allowed herself to dream. She allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, her future could be something more than she had ever imagined. As the weeks passed, Mary found herself grappling with a quiet but persistent feeling that she couldn't quite shake. Giovanni's words had left an impression on her, more profound than she had expected. "What do you want?" he had asked, and those 4 simple words had echoed in her mind long after he had left her in the garden that day. She had never allowed herself to think beyond her role as a maid, never imagined a future where she wasn't simply a servant, invisible to those around her. But now, things were different. She was different. Every day, she noticed the small shifts in the way people treated her. The staff no longer whispered behind her back, no longer gave her the sidelong glances they once did. Even the way Don Vincent addressed her had changed. He no longer treated her with the cold indifference that she had grown accustomed to. He spoke to her with respect, as though she were an equal. It was a strange feeling, one that she was still learning to navigate. It felt like a dream at times, too good to be true. Yet, as the days went by, Mary could see that this wasn't a passing phase. The respect she had earned was real, and with it came a new weight. She wasn't just a part of the household. She was being treated as a person, someone whose thoughts and feelings mattered. Giovanni's continued kindness only added to the weight of this new reality. He had been the catalyst for this change, but now, Mary could see the depth of his character. His sincerity was undeniable. He wasn't just being kind to her out of pity. He genuinely wanted to see her thrive, to see her become more than just a maid. One evening, as Mary was finishing her shift, Giovanni appeared at the kitchen door. She looked up, startled by his sudden appearance. He gave her a small, reassuring smile. "Mary," he said, his voice warm. "I hope I'm not interrupting. I just wanted to check in." She felt a pang of surprise at his words. It wasn't the first time he had come to talk to her, but it still caught her off guard. "No, you're not interrupting," she replied, offering him a smile in return. "I'm just finishing up here." Giovanni stepped into the room, his hands casually tucked into his pockets. "Good," he said. "I wanted to talk to you about something." Mary felt a flutter of nervousness in her chest. "What is it?" she asked, though she had no idea what he could possibly want to discuss. Giovanni hesitated for a moment, as though carefully choosing his words. "I've been thinking about your future," he said, his tone steady. "And I know I've asked you what you want before, but I wanted to say it again. I truly believe you can have more. More than this life. More than just being here in this house." Mary's heart skipped a beat. "More?" she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. Giovanni nodded. "I see so much potential in you, Mary. I know that you've spent years thinking of yourself as just a maid, just a servant. But that's not all you are. You're strong, intelligent, and capable of so much more. I want to help you get there." His words sent a wave of warmth through Mary, but they also brought a rush of fear. Was she ready for this? Was she ready to change, to step into something unknown? She had never imagined herself doing anything else. Never. Thought she was capable of a life beyond the confines of the mansion. "I don't know if I'm ready," she confessed quietly. "I've never really thought about it, Giovanni. I've always just been here, doing what I was told. I don't know what else there is for me." Giovanni took a step closer, his gaze softening with understanding. "I know it's hard to imagine something different," he said gently. "But I truly believe that you have the power to create whatever future you want. And I'm here to help you with that, if you'll let me." Mary swallowed hard, the weight of his words sinking in. She had spent so many years living in the shadows, so many years feeling as though her life had no purpose beyond serving others. But now, Giovanni was offering her something more. He was offering her a chance at something she had never dared to dream of, a life where she could be more than just invisible. "I don't know if I can do this," she admitted, her voice wavering. "But I'm willing to try. For the first time in a long time, I feel like maybe I'm worth something more." Giovanni smiled, a warmth in his eyes that made Mary's heart flutter. "You are worth more, Mary. And I'll be here to help you every step of the way." As Giovanni turned to leave, Mary stood there, her mind racing with thoughts and emotions. She wasn't sure what the future held, but she knew one thing. This was the beginning of something new. For the first time in her life, she felt like she had a choice. And that was the first step toward the future she had never dared to imagine. The weeks that followed felt like a slow, steady transformation for Mary. Every morning as she woke, she could feel the change, both within herself and in the way others treated her. She wasn't just a maid anymore. She wasn't invisible. Giovanni's words continued to echo in her mind. What do you want? He had shown her a future beyond the confines of the mansion, and now, she was learning to believe in that possibility. But despite all the kindness and respect she was receiving, there was still a lingering feeling of hesitation. Could she truly leave the life she had always known? Could she dare to build something different, something of her own? The thought was both thrilling and terrifying. She spent her days working in the mansion, still fulfilling her duties, but with a new sense of purpose. No longer was she just going through the motions. She felt seen, valued, and for the first time in her life, she began to imagine a future that didn't involve just cleaning and serving. One afternoon, as she cleaned the grand hallway, Giovanni approached her again, his expression thoughtful. He had been more present in her life recently, always checking in, always encouraging her to think about her future. Today, he seemed more serious than usual. "Mary," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "I've been thinking a lot about what we discussed before. About you and what you want. I know you've been hesitant, and I understand. It's a big change. But I want to tell you something." Mary paused in her work, turning to face him. "What is it?" she asked, her heart pounding in her chest. Giovanni looked at her for a long moment, his dark eyes filled with sincerity. "I believe in you," he said quietly. "I believe you can achieve anything you set your mind to, and I want to help you get there." The words hit her harder than she expected. She had never imagined someone, especially Giovanni, would believe in her like this. She had always believed that her worth was tied to the service she provided, but now, Giovanni was telling her that her worth was inherent, that she was capable of so much more than she had ever imagined. "But I don't know what to do," Mary confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've spent my whole life just surviving, just getting by. I don't know how to build a future outside of this." Giovanni stepped closer, his presence reassuring. "You don't have to know all the answers right now," he said. "But I can help you figure it out. You don't have to do it alone." Mary felt tears welling in her eyes, but she blinked them away, not wanting to show any weakness. She had spent so many years hiding her emotions, keeping everything locked away, but Giovanni's belief in her made it impossible to ignore the feelings she had buried for so long. "I don't even know where to start," she whispered. Giovanni smiled, a small, encouraging smile that made Mary feel like she was seeing him for the first time. "That's okay," he said. "We'll figure it out together. The first step is just to believe that you deserve more. And you do, Mary. You deserve so much more." Mary nodded, her heart swelling with gratitude. It wasn't easy to let go of the fear, to let herself believe that she could have a future beyond this mansion. But Giovanni's words gave her the courage to take that first step. Later that evening, as she sat alone in her small room, Mary thought about everything that had changed. She thought about Giovanni's belief in her, about the way Don Vincent had apologized and promised to treat her with respect. She thought about the future, about what it might look like if she dared to step beyond the confines of the life she had always known. The thought was overwhelming, but it was also liberating. For the first time, Mary allowed herself to dream. She imagined a life where she wasn't just serving others, where she wasn't invisible, where she had a voice and a purpose. And as she thought about it, she realized something. She had already taken the first step. She had already begun to change. It wasn't going to be easy. She knew that. But with Giovanni's support, and with the newfound respect from Don Vincent and the rest of the household, she felt like she could take on whatever came next. She wasn't just the maid anymore. She was Mary, a woman with potential, with dreams, and with a future that she could finally start to shape for herself. The next morning, as she walked through the mansion, she no longer felt like a shadow. She walked with her head held high, her steps confident. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for certain. She was no longer invisible, and that was the most powerful feeling of all. Mary had never felt more uncertain in her life. It had been several weeks since Giovanni had planted the seed of change in her heart, and although she had started to embrace the idea of a future beyond the confines of the Romano mansion, doubt still lingered. The life she had known for so long was comfortable, predictable even, despite the many hardships she had faced. Now, as she walked through the grand halls of the mansion, a place she had cleaned countless times without ever truly feeling part of, the weight of possibility hung heavily on her shoulders. She was no longer just a maid. The respect she had gained was real, but it also came with its own set of expectations, both from others and herself. What did she truly want? She had spent years denying herself the luxury of desire, suppressing the need for more, for something greater than what she had always known. But now, Giovanni had given her the courage to face those desires head-on. The challenge was in knowing where to begin. One afternoon, as Mary worked quietly in the garden, she noticed Giovanni watching her from the doorway of the kitchen. He had become a regular presence in her life, someone who had consistently offered her encouragement, guidance, and, most importantly, belief in her potential. His eyes met hers, and for a brief moment, the world around them seemed to fade. "Mary," Giovanni called softly, his voice calm but purposeful. "Can we talk?" She nodded, setting aside the gardening tools she had been using. A soft breeze rustled through the trees, and for the first time, Mary felt like she could breathe freely. "Of course," she replied, walking toward him. Giovanni gave her a small, reassuring smile, but there was something different in his demeanor today. He seemed more serious, more focused than usual. "I've been thinking," he began, his eyes searching hers, "about the future. Yours, to be specific." Mary felt a flicker of anxiety stir within her. She had thought about her future, of course, but the reality of it was daunting. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Giovanni's gaze softened. "I know that you've come a long way since we first met," he said. "But there's still so much more for you to explore, so much more for you to experience. You have so much potential, Mary. I want to help you make the most of it." His words were gentle, but they hit her like a wave. She had never thought of herself as someone with potential, not until Giovanni had spoken those words to her. For so long, she had believed that her life was meant to serve others, to stay in the background, invisible. But now, with his encouragement, she felt as if the doors of possibility were beginning to open. "I don't know where to start," Mary admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "Everything feels so big. I don't know if I can do this." Giovanni smiled warmly, his eyes full of understanding. "You don't have to have it all figured out right away," he reassured her. "The important thing is that you're willing to try. You don't have to do it alone, Mary. I'm here, and I believe in you." Her heart swelled at his words, but a part of her still held back, still feared the unknown. The future was a blank slate, but Mary had never allowed herself the luxury of dreaming about the possibilities it might hold. Her whole life had been spent working, surviving, never questioning what could be. Now, as she stood in front of Giovanni, she realized that she had a chance to redefine everything. "I want to believe in it," she said softly, her voice barely audible. "But I'm afraid of failing. I'm afraid of stepping out of my comfort zone and not being able to handle what comes next." Giovanni placed a hand gently on her shoulder, his touch warm and reassuring. "It's okay to be afraid," he said. "Fear is a part of growth. But don't let it control you. You are stronger than you think, Mary. You've already come so far." Mary looked down at the ground, her mind racing. What if she wasn't strong enough? What if the life she had built here in the mansion was all she could ever have? But Giovanni's words kept ringing in her ears. "You are stronger than you think." Slowly, she lifted her gaze to meet his. "I'm willing to try," she said, her voice steadier now. "I'm willing to see what's out there, beyond the walls of this house." Giovanni's smile widened, his eyes shining with pride. "That's all I ask," he said. "One step at a time." And so, with those words, Mary made a decision. She would no longer live in fear of what could be. She would take that first step into the unknown, knowing that she was not alone. Giovanni had shown her the way, and now it was up to her to follow it. As the days went by, Mary began to make small changes in her life. She spoke up more often, sharing her thoughts with Giovanni, with the other staff members. She began to realize that her voice mattered, that her opinions were valid. And slowly, she started to believe that she was worthy of a life outside of servitude. Giovanni's support was unwavering, but it was Mary who had to make the choice to move forward. It wasn't easy, but with each passing day, she felt more empowered. She was no longer just the maid. She was Mary, a woman with dreams, with desires, and with the potential to change her own future. And as she took those first steps, she knew that whatever came next, she was ready for it. The days that followed Mary's decision to take that first step into the unknown were a whirlwind of emotions and small, gradual changes. Every day felt like a new chapter in her life, one that she was writing for herself rather than being a passive participant. Giovanni continued to support her in ways that she never could have imagined, and although he was a constant presence in her life, it was her own strength and determination that began to shine through. She was no longer just a maid. She had become a woman who was reclaiming her voice and her future. One afternoon, as Mary was organizing the books in the grand library, she noticed Giovanni walking toward her. He had been working closely with her on various tasks, giving her more responsibility, and each new challenge felt like another opportunity for her to prove that she was capable of much more than she had ever given herself credit for. "Mary," Giovanni called, his voice steady and calm, though there was a hint of excitement in it. She looked up from the bookshelves, meeting his gaze. "Yes?" she asked, her heart skipping a beat. She had learned to expect the unexpected with Giovanni. "I've been thinking," he began, taking a step closer. "There's an opportunity coming up that I think could be the perfect chance for you to showcase everything you've learned so far." Mary raised an eyebrow, unsure of where this conversation was headed. "What opportunity?" she asked. Giovanni smiled, his eyes lighting up with enthusiasm. "The family is hosting an important event in a few weeks. A gathering with important guests, business partners, clients, and some key figures from our network. Normally, it's the staff who prepares everything and stays in the background, but this time, I want you to be front and center. I want you to take charge of the event planning." Mary's eyes widened in surprise. "Me?" she echoed, her voice thick with disbelief. Giovanni nodded, his expression serious. "Yes, you've proven yourself time and time again, and I think it's time for you to step up and show what you're capable of. This isn't just about serving or cleaning. This is your chance to take control, make decisions, and truly be a part of something bigger. I believe you can handle it." Mary felt a rush of emotions flooding her chest. Fear, excitement, and an overwhelming sense of being pushed into the unknown. She had never imagined herself taking on such a role, let alone in the midst of such an important event. Her whole life had been spent in the background, invisible and unnoticed. But now, Giovanni was offering her the chance to step into the spotlight. She knew this was a pivotal moment, one that could change everything. "I don't know if I'm ready," she said softly, though the hesitation in her voice was now mixed with a growing sense of excitement. Giovanni smiled gently, his voice full of reassurance. "You don't have to have everything figured out right now, but you have the skills, the intelligence, and the heart to make this a success. I'll be with you every step of the way. But this is your chance, Mary. This is the moment you've been waiting for." Mary took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the decision settle on her shoulders. For so long, she had felt small and invisible. But now, Giovanni was asking her to be seen, to be recognized for her abilities. She realized that this was the first time someone had truly believed in her potential. She had been given the chance to change her future. "I'll do it," she said, her voice steady with newfound determination. Giovanni's smile widened, his eyes gleaming with pride. "I knew you would. You're going to do great things, Mary." Over the next few weeks, Mary poured herself into the preparations for the event. She meticulously planned every detail, from the guest list to the decor, to the food and drink that would be served. She worked closely with the other staff members, earning their respect and admiration as she took charge with confidence. There were moments of doubt, of course. There were times when Mary wondered if she was truly capable of handling everything. But Giovanni was always there, offering guidance and encouragement, and little by little, Mary started to believe in herself. The day of the event arrived, and the mansion was transformed into a place of elegance and grandeur. The guests arrived in their finest attire, and Mary stood at the center of it all, overseeing everything with a sense of control she had never felt before. The atmosphere was electric, filled with laughter and conversation as the Romano family mingled with their guests. Mary had never imagined that she would be standing here, in this position, but as she looked around, she realized that this was her moment. She had worked hard for this, and it was finally paying off. Giovanni watched her from across the room, his eyes full of pride. He had known all along that she had the potential to do something extraordinary, and now, seeing her in action, he knew he had made the right decision in giving her this opportunity. As the night went on, everything went smoothly. The guests were impressed, and the event was hailed as a success. Mary moved through the crowd, feeling a sense of accomplishment and pride that she had never experienced before. She wasn't just a maid anymore. She was someone who had taken charge, made a difference, and shown everyone, including herself, that she was capable of greatness. By the end of the evening, as the last guests left and the mansion began to quiet down, Mary stood by the door, watching them depart. Giovanni approached her, his smile as warm as ever. "You did it, Mary," he said softly. "You were amazing." Mary felt a smile tug at the corners of her lips, the satisfaction of the night's success filling her heart. "Thank you, Giovanni," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. "I never thought I could do something like this, but I'm so glad I tried." Giovanni nodded. "You're stronger than you think, Mary. This is just the beginning." Mary nodded, feeling the truth of his words settle deep within her. She had taken that first step into the unknown, and now there was no turning back. She had a future she could shape on her own terms. And for the first time, she truly believed in the possibility of it all. The weeks that followed the successful event were a time of deep reflection for Mary. The change she had experienced was undeniable, but it was also unsettling. She had always been accustomed to serving others, fading into the background, never questioning her place. But now, she had stepped into the light, and with that light came a new set of challenges. Giovanni's words continued to echo in her mind. This is just the beginning. She had achieved something remarkable, but it felt like the first step of a much larger journey. She wasn't sure where this journey would take her, but she knew she was ready to keep moving forward. Every day brought new tasks, new responsibilities. The staff and the family treated her differently now, with respect and even admiration. Don Vincent, though still the patriarch of the Romano family, had shown her a kindness that she had never imagined he was capable of. His transformation, like hers, was slow but steady. He would occasionally check in with her, offering her guidance and advice when needed. He had even invited her to join in discussions about the family's future business ventures, something that would have been unthinkable months ago. Giovanni, too, continued to play an important role in her life. He remained her steady support, the person who had given her the confidence to pursue a future she had once thought impossible. He had encouraged her to take on more leadership roles within the household, helping her to further solidify her position and gain the trust of the other staff members. One evening, as the sun began to set, Giovanni invited her to join him for a walk through the estate's gardens. It had become a ritual of sorts for them, a time for conversation, reflection, and, at times, quiet companionship. Mary had come to look forward to these moments. "Mary," Giovanni said as they strolled along the garden path, the air warm with the scent of blooming flowers. "How are you feeling about everything? About the changes? About the future?" Mary paused for a moment, considering his question. She had spent so long focused on the present, on the immediate tasks at hand, that she hadn't really thought about her future in a concrete way. But now, with Giovanni's question hanging in the air, she realized just how much had shifted in her mind. "I feel a little overwhelmed," she admitted, her voice quiet. "It's strange. I've never had so many possibilities in front of me, and I'm not sure where to start." Giovanni nodded, his expression understanding. "That's normal," he said. "It's a big change, and it's okay to feel uncertain. But you've already taken the hardest step, believing in yourself. Now, it's just about taking it one step at a time." Mary smiled, grateful for his reassurance. "I never thought I'd be here," she said softly, glancing up at him. "I never thought I could do something like this." Giovanni turned to face her, his gaze gentle but firm. "You've always been capable, Mary. It was just a matter of seeing it for yourself." They walked in comfortable silence for a few moments, the sound of their footsteps mingling with the rustling of the leaves in the evening breeze. Mary thought about how far she had come since the days when she had felt invisible, when she had resigned herself to a life of service without question. She had taken control of her own destiny, and with that control came a sense of power she had never experienced before. "I've been thinking about what you said," she continued, her voice thoughtful, "about the future, and I think I want more. More than just staying here, more than just being part of the background. I want to build something. I want to create something for myself. Giovanni smiled, his eyes lighting up with pride. That's the spirit, he said. And you can. You have the skills, the intelligence, and the heart to do anything you set your mind to. I'm here to help, every step of the way. Mary felt a swell of emotion in her chest. She had always been told that her role was to serve, to remain invisible. But now, for the first time, she saw herself as someone with potential, someone who could shape her own destiny. Thank you, she said, her voice thick with gratitude. I don't think I could have done any of this without you. You've given me the courage to believe in myself. Giovanni placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch warm and comforting. You've always had it in you, Mary. You just needed someone to remind you of that. As they continued walking, Mary felt a sense of calm settle over her. The uncertainty that had plagued her for so long was beginning to fade, replaced by a quiet confidence that she had never known before. She wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time, she felt like she could face it head-on. Giovanni's belief in her had unlocked something within herself, a strength she had never acknowledged before. She was ready to take on whatever came next. You know, Giovanni said, breaking the silence, there's a lot we could do. We could make a real difference, not just here, but beyond this mansion. There's a whole world out there, and I think you're ready to be a part of it. Mary looked at him, a spark of excitement flickering in her chest. I think I'm ready, she said. And for the first time, she truly believed it. The next few weeks brought a whirlwind of activity for Mary. She had embraced the opportunity to take charge of the upcoming event, and each day, she felt herself growing more confident, more capable. She no longer questioned her ability to lead. Giovanni's unwavering support had given her the courage to step into a world that had always felt just beyond her reach. As the event drew nearer, the stakes felt higher. Mary was no longer simply overseeing preparations. She was making decisions, taking ownership of every aspect, from the guest list to the schedule. She coordinated with the staff, ensured that every detail was accounted for, and even made sure the house was in pristine condition for the guests who would soon arrive. The transformation was palpable. Where once she had moved through the halls of the mansion like a shadow, now she walked with purpose, her presence no longer unnoticed. But despite the excitement and pride she felt in her work, there was an underlying nervousness. The weight of this responsibility, this newfound place in the world, was not something she had ever been prepared for. She had spent years in the background, never imagining she would be the one in charge, leading such an important event. What if she failed? What if all of her hard work came undone? Giovanni, of course, continued to encourage her. Every time doubt crept in, he was there with a reassuring smile and words of encouragement. You've got this, Mary, he would say. I believe in you. And with those simple words, her fears would dissipate, and she would dive back into her work. But as the day of the event finally arrived, the pressure mounted. The mansion was buzzing with activity. The staff worked in a flurry of motion, making final preparations, while Mary moved calmly through the halls, checking on everything, making sure everything was perfect. She had worked tirelessly for this moment, and now, as she watched the first guests begin to arrive, a wave of realization washed over her. This was her moment. The moment when she would show not only the Romano family, but also herself, just how far she had come. As the evening unfolded, everything went smoothly. The guests were impressed by the event's seamless execution, the elegance of the mansion, and the attention to detail that Mary had so meticulously planned. She floated through the night, overseeing everything with grace and confidence. Her heart swelled with pride as she saw the smiles on the faces of the Romano family, the guests enjoying themselves, and the staff working together in harmony. It was the culmination of months of hard work, of believing in herself when no one else had. As the event came to a close and the last guests departed, Mary found herself standing at the front door, watching them leave. She was exhausted, her body aching from the long hours, but she felt a sense of fulfillment she had never experienced before. Giovanni approached her, his eyes filled with pride. You did it, Mary, he said, his voice full of admiration. You were incredible tonight. Mary turned to him, her smile beaming. I couldn't have done it without your support, she replied. Giovanni shook his head. No, you did this on your own. You were ready for this. You've always been ready. Mary felt a lump form in her throat. She had worked so hard for this, and now, as she stood there with Giovanni, she realized just how far she had come. She wasn't the same person who had walked into the Romano mansion all those years ago. She was someone new, someone who had the strength to take charge of her own future. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice full of gratitude. Giovanni smiled, a warm and genuine smile that made her heart swell. "I'm proud of you, Mary. You've earned this. And this is only the beginning." As the night settled in, and the mansion grew quiet, Mary stood in the doorway, looking out at the world beyond. For the first time, she felt like she belonged. She had taken the first step toward the life she had always dreamed of, and she knew that no matter what came next, she was ready. With Giovanni's belief in her, and her own newfound confidence, Mary was finally ready to take on the world. The weeks following the success of the event were a time of reflection and growth for Mary. The realization that she had stepped into her own power was slowly sinking in, but with it came new challenges, new questions about what her future could hold. Giovanni continued to be a steady presence in her life, guiding her as she navigated this new world she had begun to build. There were still moments of doubt, moments when the old fears crept back in, the fear of failure, the fear of being dismissed or overlooked once more. But each time those fears appeared, she reminded herself of how far she had come, of the strength she had discovered within herself. One afternoon, as Mary was walking through the estate's lush gardens, Giovanni found her again, as he so often did, a quiet support in the background of her life. His presence had become familiar, a source of reassurance. He approached with a smile, but today, there was something different in his expression. "Mary," he called, his voice calm, yet filled with purpose. "I've been thinking a lot lately. About what's next for you." Mary stopped in her tracks, feeling a flutter of nerves in her stomach. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Giovanni stepped closer, his gaze thoughtful. "I've seen how much you've grown, and I know this is just the beginning. You've taken control of your life in ways I never imagined, and now, I think it's time for you to start thinking about where you want to go from here. What do you want to do next?" Mary felt a wave of uncertainty wash over her. The question he posed seemed simple, but it was one she hadn't yet answered for herself. She had spent so many years simply surviving, simply going through the motions, that she had never really considered what she truly wanted. "I'm not sure," she admitted, her voice shaking slightly. "I've spent so long doing what was expected of me, just trying to get by. But now, with everything that's changed, I don't know where to begin." Giovanni's eyes softened, and he placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "It's okay to feel uncertain, but I want you to understand that you have the power to choose. You don't have to stay in this role, in this house, if it's not what you want. I've seen you take charge. I've seen the potential in you. Whatever you choose to do next, I'll be here to support you." Mary's heart swelled with gratitude, and for the first time, she felt a sense of freedom that had previously seemed impossible. She wasn't just stuck in this mansion, trapped by her circumstances. She was free to explore, to dream, to become more than she had ever imagined. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I've never had someone believe in me like this before." Giovanni smiled warmly. "You've always had the strength, Mary. It just took someone reminding you of it." The conversation lingered in Mary's mind for days, as she began to imagine what her life could be beyond the confines of the Romano mansion. For so long, she had lived in the shadows, never daring to dream of a future that didn't involve serving others. But now, as she stood at the edge of a new chapter, she realized that the world was wide open. She didn't have to limit herself. She could create the life she wanted. She could build a future on her own terms. In the days that followed, Mary began to take action. She started small, taking on new responsibilities around the mansion, speaking up in meetings with the Romano family's business partners, and exploring her own interests and talents. She sought out opportunities to learn and grow, to develop skills that would help her thrive outside of the role she had always known. One afternoon, Giovanni took her aside once again, this time with a new proposition. "Mary," he said, his voice steady, "I've been thinking. There's a job opportunity that has opened up. It's with one of our partners, a company that specializes in event planning and management. They're looking for someone with your skills, someone who has the ability to organize, to lead. I think you'd be perfect for it." Mary felt her breath catch in her throat. "Event planning? The very thing she had been doing for the Romano family's event, but on a much larger scale, for a different audience. The idea of stepping into that world was daunting, but exhilarating. "I'm not sure I'm ready," she said, her voice tinged with doubt. "It's a big step. I've never worked outside of the mansion before." Giovanni's expression softened, and he placed a hand on her shoulder once more. "Mary, I know you're capable. You've already proven that to yourself. This is just the next step in your journey. You have the ability to make a real impact, and I believe this could be the perfect opportunity for you to truly step into your own." Mary stood there, feeling the weight of his words. It was a big decision, but it was one that she knew she needed to make. She could no longer hide in the background, no longer be content with just being a part of someone else's world. It was time to create her own. After some consideration, Mary made her decision. She accepted the job offer, knowing that this was the chance she had been waiting for. She was no longer just the maid. She was a woman with ambition, with goals, and with the drive to make them a reality. Giovanni's support had given her the courage to take that first step, and now, it was up to her to walk the path she had chosen. The world was wide open, and for the first time in her life, Mary felt ready to embrace it.